Well, first of all, I forgot to say thank you to organizers of this awesome event. Guys, you did a great job. Thank you so much for that. And I'm, as I said, very excited and very happy to share with you a bit information about the internal architecture of Angular forms. We will have a look at the internal implementation of the forms a little bit, not everything, because it's a huge topic and we are limited by the time. So I will show you some interesting highlights and we will see how we can benefit from it, how we can use those architectural decisions in order to make our forms more flexible, more maintainable, and so on. Usually, I start my talk, if it's offline, with a couple of questions. I will start as well with them just to warm up. Usually we raise the hands, but because we are not on offline meeting, you can drop your answers via comments. I see them, so I can check it as well. So yeah, the first question that I would like to ask to you, very easy, that's how many types of forms are in Angular. I'm pretty sure if you have some experience, you should know already the answer. And yes, I see first answers and all of them are correct. Yes, we have two types of forms. We have template-driven forms and reactive forms. And now I have another question, and it's a bit more tricky one. So can you determine, giving this context, having this code, can you determine for sure about which type of forms we are currently talking about? Is it template-driven forms or it is maybe reactive forms? What do you think? Try to drop your answers. So I see reactive forms, both reactive forms. So most of the answers I see reactive forms. And for those who answered it like that, I have a good and bad news for you. So you are partially right. No, the good news is that you are right, and the bad news that you are partially right, because it depends. And I'm happy to see a lot of answers in the comments who answered that both, because indeed forms models, those are like very unique building block that is shared between all types of forms. But before, yeah, again, quick introduction. So it was already done, but yeah, my name is Dmytro Mezhenskyi. I'm the author of the Decoded Frontend YouTube channel, and this QR code leads to my channel, so you can use your phones right now to scan it and check it out, and hopefully you will find my channel and the content I create useful. But let's get back to the topic. And yeah, as I said, models, they are core building blocks for all types of forms. But before we go and see how they are kind of used there, let's try to figure out what the role of form controls of these models in general in Angular. So let's get started with just simple input, text input. What we can say about it? We can say that, okay, it is currently invalid, but it might be valid, right? It might have or might not have some value probably, or it might be disabled or enabled. So we can say that this form control has some certain state, right? And the role of the models is to describe the state of the native form control, that the corresponding native form control. Because Angular, it doesn't work like directly with the native control. It has this kind of model, these abstractions like form control. From there we get values, from there we do everything, and this is the model API. So if you worked with reactive forms, you know this API very well, I'm pretty sure, because yeah, this is general thing we do. So we can subscribe to value changes and track and react to it. We can change the state of the model by using the set value, for example, method, disable it, and so on. So this is how we interact with the model and change its state. And it is not alone. There are actually multiple of these models, not only form control, but we have some others, and all of them kind of extend the abstract control. This is the abstract class where the most of the API you saw like inherited by all these derived classes. There is a small note, there is missing form record model, but yeah, this is the same as a form group. Basically, it's needed just to simplify the typings, but from the functional point of view, form group and form record is the same. But we currently will focus mostly on the form control. We will get back to the grouping of the controls later in this talk, but now let's focus on the form control. Let's continue to explore this part of Angular forms. And let's talk about the connection between models and controls, because by itself, models, they are pretty useless because it's just simple JavaScript class, right? So how we kind of connect them together, and we connect them by using directives that allows you to map that, okay, this exactly form control in the template like corresponds the form control model there. And we have a group, the whole group of these directives that allow us to perform that. For reactive forms, we have two directives. This is the form control for the standalone controls, and don't confuse it with the standalone components. It is slightly different concept. Standalone form control, this is the control that exists outside of the form. A good example would be, for example, in the header, we very often have something like search field, and this is a good example of the standalone form control because we don't need the whole form for that. And in order to connect form controls that are part of some particular form, we have the form control name directive, where we just provide the key of the model that we have to connect, and that's it. And for the template-driven forms, we have another like more magical approach. So we have some property of a component, and we provide it as a value for the ng model that uses two-way data binding in order to magically connect the class property with the value of the form and vice versa. And here you might raise a question like, okay, it is very clear in reactive forms that we use this form control model, and this is explicitly and obvious. But in template-driven forms, we don't see the usage of it. But actually, if you have a look at the source code of the ng model, you will see that literally the very first line in the corresponding directive class has a property where we create under the hood the corresponding form control model. So it happens just implicitly. It happens automatically by Angular, so you don't have to instantiate it manually as you do it in reactive forms. Then, yeah, the question, like, what we can get from it. So this is great piece of information, but how we can apply it in practice. Some of you maybe heard think that in template-driven forms, you cannot reactively react to the changes of the certain form control. Yeah, so if you have form control, you applied ng model, you cannot track the changes reactively. You cannot, I don't know, pipe it with RxJS operators and so on. But actually, knowing what we know right now, we actually can inject the NgModel directive, and because it has a property, the instance of which one is a form control model, now we can get this instance through accessing the control property, and we can subscribe to value changes and work with that as if it was their reactive form. So this is how you can use this knowledge and create the functionality that requires your needs. For example, here, this is an example of some control status tracker component where it might be directive that attaches to the control, and you listen to the status changes. If the control is valid or invalid, then you can render dynamically some error messages or whatever you want. There might be quite a lot of different use cases. So I hope it's pretty much clear. I cannot follow the chat all the time, but I hope everything is clear. Anyway, there will be QA session. Write down your questions, and I will try to answer them later. Now let's move forward, and let's talk about synchronization of the values and all the state between the native control and with a corresponding model, because what we learned currently is how they kind of know about each other, how we map that this control to this control belongs this corresponding model. But we also would like to know how the synchronization happens, because model has to be always in sync with the native control and vice versa. And this is quite like deep dive is going to be, but it will be very interesting. I actually, when I was investigated that, I was very it was very interesting for me how it actually works and how it was implemented. So if you try to investigate some component that has input with the form control directive applied, or not necessarily it must be form control, it might be a form control name, it might be NgModel. So if you try to look at it at Angular DevTools, for example, you might see that despite we apply only one directive, form control, actually there resides three directives. It is a default ValueAccessor, NgControl status, and the form control directive itself. That's quite interesting, and the most interesting part is this default ValueAccessor. And what is even more interesting, if you try to investigate another input of another type, for example, input with a type checkbox, you will see very similar picture, but with only one difference, and the difference is the ValueAccessor. So for different type of input, there is different control ValueAccessor is used. In our case, this is a checkbox control ValueAccessor. And ValueAccessor plays actually the key role in the synchronization of the control state. How it happened, you'll see in a minute, but so far, let's learn what makes control ValueAccessor actually control ValueAccessor. Which requirements have to be performed in order to make some building blocks like directive or component to be a control ValueAccessor that can synchronize values. So first of all, we need the NgValueAccessor token. This is how Angular will be understanding that this is exactly control ValueAccessor. And the value of this token have to be some class that implements the control value interface. This interface will require you or anyone who implements the functionality implement at least three methods. It's a write value, register on change, register on touched, and one is optional. It is a set disabled state. Using these four methods, okay, I will rephrase it. These three methods allows component or directive or any other element behave as a normal form control from the point of view of Angular. And we will see in a minute how Angular is using these methods. But before, what I want to mention is that implementation of concrete ValueAccessor is very different, and it's different from ValueAccessor to ValueAccessor. So, for example, if we're talking about the default ValueAccessor that is applied to the input with the type text, the right implementation of the right value method will be something like the following. We get the reference to the native element, and we change the property value and assign the value that we get to this right value method. And in such a way, we kind of update the view. We made the view that like the state of the view will be corresponding the state of the eventually model. And because we can work with different form controls which have different APIs. So for another form control, for example, for the checkbox control ValueAccessor, the implementation will be different. And because the checkbox native element doesn't have something like value, it uses the checked property in order to select or deselect a checkbox. Maybe value property also exists, but in order to render this check for the checkbox, we need to set checked as a true or a false. So depending on the type of the control, different implementation of these methods are executed. And now let's try to see how Angular kind of uses this under the hood, how exactly this synchronization is happening. So again, the same slide. We have input, we have 3 directives residing on it. And here, what's happening, the default ValueAccessor or any accessor is being injected into the form control directive or NgModel or form control name. They do these things the same way. So you can see it in the source code right there. So we inject using the inject NgValueAccessor token. We inject the ValueAccessor that resides on this node. And when we have the reference to this ValueAccessor, we call, or like Angular call inside NgOnChanges lifecycle hook, it calls function setUpControl. And there it provides the form, which is actually the model that we provide via directive inside the template, right? And it provides it's like the instance of this directive that has a reference to the control ValueAccessor. And this whole magic, this whole binding happens inside this setUpControl function. For example, this is how it looks. And this is where the first synchronization of the model and corresponding native form control happens. You can see immediately we call the right value of the ValueAccessor and provide the value that currently has model. We provided synchronization from model to the view happens, and then we immediately check if the form control is disabled. So if the model, if the JavaScript class form control has disabled property to true, then we again call the ValueAccessor method setDisabledState and say if it's true or false. And setDisabledState already knows how to lock the view in the way to prevent updates from the user. For example, it might set up the disabled property for the native control or prevent some certain events. It's already implementation details, and they might vary from component to component. And after that, there are 4, I call them listeners, but they are not like JavaScript listeners. That's just for me too easier to kind of understand these things. But those are functions that set up kind of binding between model and native control, and allows you to synchronize values later, because this is kind of, currently we have initial synchronization, but user can type value later, and we should have some kind of listener that tracks the changes in the native control and says, aha, user types new values, then I have to update the corresponding the model. And the same can happen vice versa. So all these things have to be kind of in sync. And this is what I call listeners. And we're not going to go through all of them. We will have a look just at some of them, just to give you some idea or understanding how it is working. So we will have a look at the setup view change pipeline. So this is the listener that tracks changes from the view. So when user changes the value, when user changes, needs to be updated the model, and this is how it happens. So when you call this setup view change pipeline, we call the method register on change of the value accessor. And as an argument for this register on change value, we provide callback function that takes a new value that we will be providing later, and inside it it gets a reference also to the control. This is our model, so it uses the closure in order to save this reference to the corresponding model. And when this function is called, the value will be updated to the new one inside this function, as well as state will be changed to the dirty. So when we change the value of the form, form becomes dirty, means value has changed. And other properties are updated, and in such a way our model kind of being synchronized with the value that comes from the view. But how exactly it comes, this is what we do manually, actually. And if you have ever implemented the control value accessor on your own, if you implemented custom form control, you probably know that, like, for almost every form control value accessor, the custom one that you implement, you have literally the same piece of code like this, like register on change. You get some magical function, you assign it to the property, and then you call this function whenever you're supposed to change or update the model. Before I started investigation and diving into under the hood, I was thinking like, this is just some piece of magic, and I had no idea what is going on there. But now you know what is going on under the hood and what the magic function you get as an argument for the register on change method. So I hope it is pretty clear. Though I have doubts because it's quite a deep dive. But anyway, what we can get from it, what knowledge, how we can apply this knowledge, which things we can do using that. So it unlocks the non-standard controls, the implementation of non-standard controls for us. For example, like we can create rating pickers that can be the normal part of our form. They also might, they out of the box get support of the validators, for example, right? And it's very, very convenient, and we can implement literally any type of controls, everything what your UI team can suggest you. Usually they come up with crazy ideas, and fortunately every crazy idea now you know how to implement and make it work. And now let's get back to the controls grouping. If you remember, I mentioned a few minutes earlier that in the models hierarchy we have groups and arrays. Models that allow us to group controls either into object or in array, because sometimes it is, especially when we have open-ended lists of data, we don't know how many elements there will be, and very often it is very convenient to work with them as array, right? And form array allows you to do it easily. And here, like the very similar story happens. In order to connect groups and corresponding parts of the view, we use a group of directives. This is the form group. This is the form group name, form array name, if we're talking about reactive forms. And for template-driven forms, we have only two directives responsible for that. This is ngForm and ngModel group. And by the way, ngForm, I applied this explicitly just for like demo purposes, but in fact, it is being applied automatically immediately once you import the forms module into your component, standalone component, or your ng module. Immediately, like ngForm will be applied to the form element, because again, I don't have the source code of it right now on the slide, but if you have a look at the source code, you will see that ngForm directive has a selector of the form element, so it will be magically attached. And what is also interesting, that grouping directives we can split into multiple groups. So we have root form groups. Those are directives that represent the root form group. Yeah, the form that contains all other nested groups and form controls. In the reactive forms, we use the form group for that, and for template-driven forms, again, ngForms. And what special this type of group directives, what special features they have? Well, they have actually the submitted state. Yes, they understand when the form is submitted. So if you want to read if the form is submitted, in the models, form group models, even if it's a root form model, you will not find this information, but you can find this information in the corresponding directive instances. So you can inject them and read submit status from there. And also they have method that allows you to reset forms and reset it properly. And what I mean by properly is that when we reset the form, very often we want to reset also the submitted state, right? And in reactive forms, maybe you encountered this situation, but I see quite often that people calling reset method for the root form group model. And it indeed resets the values, resets statuses of the form controls, but it doesn't reset submitted state. And that's why you might get bugs where you reset it, but validation error messages still remaining, because they kind of display, because you have conditioned that they are displayed when the form is not submitted, and when the form is submitted and the corresponding form control is invalid. So this is quite often happens in reactive forms. So knowing this information, you know how to where to reset, because reset methods from those directives, they also reset the submit state, not only the state of the form controls. And the next group we have, it's nested groups. Those are like form group name or form array name in reactive forms. And we have only one ngModel group in template-driven forms. They allow us to create the nested group, but as you might notice, the template-driven forms, they don't have the form array directive or anything like that. Only the ngModel group is available for us, and form array name, it's only the feature, so to say, of reactive forms. What we can get from this information, actually, I already mentioned that, but now I just get back to it with the dedicated piece of code. So as I said, if you want to, let's name it properly, yeah, it depends on your use case, what you need, but I when I say properly, I mean if you want to reset the form along with its submission state, you can get a reference to the form group directive and call the reset form method in order to reset like everything, like completely the form. And we are coming already to the end, and I would like to talk about some useful abstractions that might be also useful for you. And for that, let's get back to the following piece of code that I showed a bit earlier today. This is when you inject the NgModel, for example. You want to get, for example, reference to the corresponding form control and track the changes or things like that. But here's limitation. It works only with one type of form because we directly reference the NgModel. Right, and NgModel, this is template-driven forms, and if you build something like a library, it's obviously not an option because you have to be compatible with all types of forms. And you think like, okay, I want to support reactive forms. You change it, you introduce the form control directive, but you break the compatibility with template-driven forms. And even though this code works only with standalone reactive form controls, if you try to use form control name, like you have to always change it. Yeah, and we need some certain kind of abstraction that allows us to not depend on the concrete implementation of the form control, right? And for that, we have to dive a little bit into implementation of the directives of the form control name, and NgModel. And there we can see quite interesting things. First, you can see that all of them, they extend NgControl, some class, NgControl, and what is even more interesting, if you check the providers of them, you can see all of them have corresponding providers. And inside the providers, you will find the following construction. There is a provider that provides NgControl as a token value, and as a token key, and the value of this token is for NgModel, it's instance of the NgModel. For the form control name, it's an instance of the form control name, and vice versa. And thanks to this architectural decision, we can do the following thing. We can actually inject NgControl token, and already at runtime, via dependency injection, the concrete implementation of the control will be resolved, and you can safely subscribe to status changes without even knowing that are you working with template-driven forms and NgModel, or it is one of the directives from the reactive forms, because they inherit the same base component, they have the same API, and because of this, they have the same contract. It is safe to access the control and the corresponding values. So this is how you can make your code more like universal using this abstraction. And again, what about the groups? Because with the groups, we have the similar situation. We have a group of the directives that are responsible for that. And we also might want to track, I don't know, status, like if the group is valid or invalid, right? So there, if you have a look at the source code, you will see also quite similar situation. You will see that they extend like ngForm, form array, and others. So we have five directives, right? I didn't have place on the slide to put them all, but in general, the same thing happens there as well. So they all extend ControlContainer class. It's a base class, and also they have a provider where provided ControlContainer, that value of which one point to the instance of the ngForm directive instance, or if it's form array name, then the instance of the form array, and so on. And the same thing we can do with groups. We can simply, if we need, of course, we can inject ControlContainer via this useful abstraction. And in such a way, we can also make our directive work with any type of control containers. Either it is a nested group, or if it's a root group directive, doesn't matter. They all have the same provider, same API, so it is pretty safe to access it like that and make your control status tracker directive even more universal and flexible. And this is everything I would like to say. I hope we are in time, and I hope it was interesting and useful.
So yeah, from my perspective, Dmytro, it was extremely interesting to see the forms in depth and from like some other points of view, taking a look at the architecture of them and so on. Right now, we'll move to the Q&A session. So already saw some question on the chat. Let me bring them on. So the first one is, Dmytro, if we have a very complex form, is recommended to use some external lib like Formly for manage them, or is good practice implement this kind of form for ourselves?
It's quite hard to say because I don't have like experience, the real experience with Formly in the real applications, and I don't know how they how efficient they are in real projects, in real complex forms. So I saw just like I tried a little bit, but it was just basic things, so I cannot tell exactly. Definitely you have more control creating your solution. Yeah, there you can adjust everything to your needs and forms. This is very like context sensitive things. They are very unique from every project, and you should think about these things that formally like library might not serve your use case quite well, and you would need to like come up with workarounds and things like that. So hard to say exactly, but all approaches have pros and cons. Just take your context and try to investigate what offers the Formly and see if it matches your requirements. Then I don't see the problems. Why not? If the policy of your company allows third-party libraries, because sometimes it's quite difficult with this.
Okay, we have the next question from Michal. Good talk. What do you think of the future of forms plus signals, wishes?
I think the forms, and this is what I heard from Angular core team members, that forms, this is a really good use case for signals, and they supposed to improve them very well in terms of detecting changes, because the forms sometimes they have problems with that. Signals might bring more like predictability in this area. And overall, I think, yeah, I'm also very curious how it will be working. And yeah, I think it will be cool. I'm keeping my eye on this because of the course as well, because I have to adjust it. But we didn't get them yet, unfortunately. I hope that next version of Angular we will see already first implementation of the signals, and I think it will be really cool. And hopefully nothing will be broken, at least too much.
Yeah,
and the migration will be smooth.
Yeah, but forms and signals is definitely something a lot of us looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, Dmytro, how do you typically start building complex forms? With nested group array, do you start from bottom up, breaking down the form first, or you go top down?
It depends. Very like typical answer, but I think I go mostly from smaller pieces, from smaller pieces, and then I kind of try to how to say it, orchestrate them or like compose them. So I usually approach this way. I don't start with the big things, splitting to the smaller. I usually go with the small like atoms, yeah, and then build more complex things. But it's very individual. I mean,
yeah,
usually I do it like that, yeah. But it depends, of course.
Okay. And maybe the last question, and we can maybe simplify it because to just don't be so specific. So what are the most three mistakes working with reactive forms?
Well, this is first the resetting of the form that I mentioned, and it was inspired actually by one of the code reviews and this bug investigation. Another very popular thing is that I know maybe it comes from some legacy stuff or whatever. People sometimes mixing the template-driven forms and reactive forms together, and this is one of the worst things you can actually do. Then things become so unpredictable. But I see it happens, and I saw it not once. I saw it quite a lot of time, and was very surprised by seeing that. But yeah, and another. The third one, probably that when form control is not implemented as a control value accessor, and it is implemented as a regular component, and then at some point values are merged into the form control. But yeah, if you know what is value accessor and why it is needed, then usually don't do this mistake. But sometimes teams start like from the beginning with Angular without knowing that, and they build such a workarounds that then you have to rewrite.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the last question we got. So I think that's all. Yeah, I can see that's all. So once again, thank you very much for your presentation. Hopefully we'll see and have a chance to see again at some of our meetups. And right now, I wish you a good day. And thank you.
Thank you all. Yeah, was happy to share my knowledge.